Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We're from Group 10 and we will be presenting the law case of Adib bin Nikmat versus Public Prosecutor. My name is FATIN ALYA and I'll be starting the presentation with the facts of the case. To start, this case involves digital misconduct, specifically the spreading of offensive content on social media and the possession of obscene digital materials. The issue became serious enough to reach the courts because the accused uploaded a controversial and offensive image online and was later found to possess hundreds of obscene videos. And the case eventually reached the High Court of Malaya through an appeal. Although the accused was already found guilty by the Sessions Court, he then challenged the severity of the punishment imposed on him. And this case is legally important because it highlights how the courts balance two significant considerations: protecting public interest and giving first-time offenders a chance for rehabilitation, especially in cyber-related offences. Moving on, the case is titled Adib bin Nikmat versus Public Prosecutor 2017 MLJU 1831. The appellant Adib bin Nikmat was a teacher and the sole breadwinner for his family, and the respondent in this case is the public prosecutor. So the first charge arose on 8 August 2014 when the appellant used a Facebook account named Kopi Raja Aka to upload an offensive image called Pesta Bogel. And this image illustrated national leaders in a sexually inappropriate and offensive manner with the intention of causing annoyance to other people. And later on 21st August 2014, the police raided the appellant's home and the police seized a laptop that contained 883 obscene videos, which led to the second charge. The appellant was charged under two laws. The first one was Section 2331A of the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998 for posting offensive online content, and the second one is under Section 51A of the Film Censorship Act 2002 for possessing obscene films. And the Sessions Court found him guilty on both charges and sentenced him to 1 year of imprisonment for each offence to run consecutively, giving a total of 2 years in prison. And him being dissatisfied with the punishment, he brought the case to the High Court and appealed against the severity of the sentence. And he also argued that the punishment was quite harsh for a first-time offender like him. And he also emphasized his personal circumstances, stating that he was a low-income teacher, he was the sole provider for his family, he's being cooperative with the authorities, remorseful, and did not gain financially from the offences. But on the other hand, the prosecution argued that the offences were serious and that a deterrent sentence was necessary to discourage similar acts. And they also stressed that, as a teacher, the appellant should have set a good example towards the society. So in the end, the High Court upheld the conviction but reduced the sentence. For the first charge, the imprisonment was reduced to 1 week together with a 3,000 ringgit fine. And for the second charge, the jail sentence was removed and replaced with a 10,000 ringgit fine. So the judge also explained that the original punishment had a crushing effect on the offender and that the revised sentence was more appropriate for a first-time offender, while still recognizing the seriousness of cyber offences.
Next is the main issue of the case. The first issue is whether the accused violated Communications and Multimedia Act 1998, CMA 1998 by posting false offensive content and manipulated images of national leaders online. The court had to determine whether this action amounted to improper use of network facilities to spread offensive or misleading information. The second issue is whether the accused committed an offence by possessing obscene films and photographs. The court examined whether such possession was unlawful under Malaysian law and whether the accused should be held criminally liable. Overall, the case highlights that individuals may face legal consequences for irresponsible online activities and for possessing prohibited materials and manipulated images of national leaders online. The court had to determine whether these actions amounted to improper use of network facilities to spread offensive or misleading information. I will pass to the next presenter. Thank you.
I will explain what the court actually decided in this case. The High Court dismissed the appeal against conviction and upheld the appellant's guilt on both charges. This means that the court agreed with the Session Court's finding that the appellant had committed both offences. However, the court allowed the appeal against sentence. The court found that the original punishment imposed by the Session Court was excessive and therefore substituted it with a lighter sentence. The High Court dismissed the appeal against conviction and upheld the appellant's guilt on both charges. However, it allowed the appeal against sentence, finding the original punishment excessive and substituting it with a lighter sentence. Next, regarding the issues of law raised by the parties, the court considered whether the offences under the relevant statutes had been successfully established. The court found no reason to interfere with the Session Court's finding that the prosecution had successfully proven the offences under Section 2331A of the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998 and Section 51A of the Film Censorship Act 2002. Therefore, the conviction was legally valid and was maintained by the High Court. As a result, the legal challenge against the conviction was unsuccessful. That is all from me. Thank you.
Next, for the reason behind the judgment, the High Court considered both the seriousness of the offences and the personal circumstances of the appellant. So the court acknowledged that cyber offences are serious because false and offensive content can spread quickly through social media and reach a large number of people within a short period of time. However, the court also took into account that the appellant was a first-time offender with no previous criminal record, and in addition, he cooperated with the authorities during the investigation and showed remorse for his action. The court further noted that the appellant did not gain any financial benefit from the offences. Therefore, while the conviction was maintained, the High Court found that the original sentence was excessive and decided to impose a lighter punishment that will encourage rehabilitation and allow the appellant to reform. So as a result, the appeal against the sentence was allowed, but the appeal against the conviction was dismissed. Now, moving into the structural core of our analysis, which is the applicable law or principle of law that anchors this entire case. When you look at cyber misconduct in Malaysia, our primary legal touchstone in Section 2331A of the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998. Now, to secure a conviction under this section, the prosecution cannot just rely on general allegations. As reinforced by the High Court in Muhammad Fahmi Reza bin Muhammad Zarin v. Public Prosecutor 2020, the state must prove three strict cumulative elements beyond any reasonable doubt. First, we have the actus reus, whereby the accused must have actually utilized a network facility or service to initiate the transmission. Second, we look at the character of the content, which is that the material must be possess one of the explicit statutory traits, with meaning it must be proven to be either indecent, obscene, false, menacing, offensive, or etc. And third, the mens rea, which the transmission must be driven by a specific, intrinsic intent to annoy, abuse, threaten, or harass another person. To show you exactly how these statutory layers neatly wrap around our factual problem, I will pass the floor to the next presenter.
When we map these precise legal principles onto the scenario exemplified in Nik Adib bin Nikmat versus Public Prosecutor 2017, the alignment of criminal liability becomes undeniably clear. Let's dissect the elements one by one. First, the actus reus is easily established. The appellant plainly utilized an internet application service to upload illicit content onto a highly public Facebook page under the handle of copy.rajaakar. Second, if we examine the character of the content, it clearly crosses multiple statutory boundaries. The uploaded files consisted of explicit and nude photographs that were explicitly titled Naked Party, paired with offensive comments targeting specific public leaders. Under our regulatory framework, this is a case of obscene content because it portrays lewd sexual acts that directly shock and offend our prevailing societal standards of modesty. Furthermore, because these political figures were intentionally placed under totally fabricated and malicious context, the content simultaneously triggers the statutory definition of being false. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most heavily contested element, which also known as mens rea or specific intent. The defense might try to downplay this as a joke or political satire, but the prosecution successfully demonstrated that these explicit posts were launched with a clear, deliberate designed to vex and humiliate these leaders publicly. In law, this constitutes a manifest intent to damage reputations and provoke public annoyance. Now, a crucial piece of jurisprudence we must remember here is that Malaysian law relies on a strictly subjective inquiry, drawing from a long-standing precedent in Ong and Guan versus Public Prosecutor 1956. The court does not care whether the target was actually annoyed, hurt, or injured. What matters entirely is that the subjective state of mind of the publisher at the exact moment the transmission was initiated. Did he intend to cause that vexation? In this case, absolutely yes. On top of that, the court also noted that because he also had these explicit files on his device, he faced overlapping liability under the Film Censorship Act 2002 for the possession of obscene materials. The court made a highly progressive remark here regarding cyber offences, whereby in our modern digital landscape, possessing this kind of media is incredibly dangerous because it acts as a force multiplier. At the simple touch of a button, it can be viralized and disseminated to millions within seconds. Therefore, by combining the strict requirements of Section 233 of the Communication Multimedia Act with the Film Censorship Act, the court established a seamless legal net that completely captures the appellant's liability.
To conclude, this case involved a religious instructor who was found guilty of posting offensive and altered image of national leaders, as well as possessing obscene material. The case also highlights the conflict between cybercrime offences and appropriate sentencing for an educator. From the Islamic perspective, the offender's actions violated the principle of Hifz an-Nas, which emphasized protecting the dignity and reputation of others. The spread of offensive and misleading content can harm individuals and society. The case also relates to fitnah or slander, which Islam considers a serious offense because it damages social harmony. Furthermore, as a religious educator, the offender failed to uphold uswah hasanah, which means being a good role model for the community. Next, this case also provides several important legal lessons. So first, sentencing is based on judicial discretion and is not a fixed formula. Higher courts will only intervene when a sentence is clearly unreasonable or based on the wrong legal principles. In this case, the lower court was found to have imposed the maximum penalty on a first-time offender without sufficient justification. Second, the court emphasized the balance between public interest and rehabilitation. While cybercrime must be punished, the sentence should not be so severe that it destroys the offender's future. Rehabilitation is especially important for first-time offenders who show remorse and have a clean record. And last but not least, the case reflects trends in cybercrime sentencing. Courts generally favor proportional punishments such as fines or good behavior bonds, particularly when the offense does not involve violence or financial gain. Mitigating factors can also lead to a lighter sentences.